Peace families, Picard Lamone with the progenitor of LamoonSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage while always betting on Black. Back once again with a first live stream for Lamone Speaks, where we're talking about celebrating Juneteenth, the good, the bad, and the ugly. As we all know, Juneteenth was just this past Saturday. Many of us have considered Juneteenth to be a Black Independence Day or even a Freedom Day. And for the first time ever, what we have found is that the federal government has decided to designate, per the Biden administration, that Juneteenth is now a federal holiday. So there was a lot of discussion being taking place regarding how should we as a Black community should feel about that. So I'm just here to kind of chime in, share my thoughts, so on and so forth. So first and foremost, I think it's very important that we understand. We're actually talking about Juneteenth. It reminds me of a situation my son, who's a teenager now, Lord have mercy, had when he was in second grade, where it's Black History Month. The teacher stated that Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. My son's hand shot up, and he says, Lincoln didn't free the slaves. We freed ourselves, and we're still fighting to free ourselves. And I think that statement that my son made way back when he was in second grade, he's now in high school, is reflective of something that is true, that we have never truly had freedom in this country. We have never truly ended the Ma'afa, the African Holocaust of colonialism, imperialism, racism, and slavery, and that we're still working to do that now. And that work, of course, is arduous. It takes long, it's painstaking. And as Amilcar Cabral taught us, we should claim no easy victories, mask no difficulties, and tell no lies, right? When we talk about the protracted nature of prolonged struggle. But with that being said, as many of us are aware, the Emancipation Proclamation was signed into law January 1st, 1863 by Abraham Lincoln. Many Black churches still engage in what they call watch night services, in which December 31st, people stay up and wait for what? The new year to ring in. That was based on, of course, African Americans at the time having a watch night service, waiting for the Emancipation Proclamation to be decreed and could declare law in the United States of America. However, as we all know, Juneteenth, the celebration of Juneteenth comes from the fact that emancipation, quote unquote emancipation, was not given to us, our ancestors, until what? June 19th, 1865, Galveston, Texas. And so with that being said, I really kind of put in air quotes that we would see emancipation. Now, I really don't use the term or terminology or language of chattel enslavement ending, because the late, great sociologist W.B. Du Bois stated, for the African-American slave, we had a brief moment in the sun, that day of Jubilee, as he called it. And then we went right back into, of course, servitude, or as Dr. Michelle Alexander argues, what Michelle Alexander talks about in her book, The New Jim Crow, a system of social control. And that brief moment in the sun, that day of Jubilee, what we call Juneteenth, was followed by what? Black codes and sharecropping, which we went right back into having our rights as American citizens stripped from us after, of course, the Compromise of 1878, in which Rutherford B. Hayes was elected president, and the Union troops were removed from the South, which created, of course, as we know, was the time of the first nadir. Furthermore, I think we also have to, when we had this conversation about Juneteenth, there's been some pushback from people on the right arguing against Juneteenth, right? I think first and foremost, we have to understand and recognize that we don't need the dominant society's approval to celebrate ourselves. We've been celebrating Juneteenth for over 150 some years. We're going to continue to do that. We celebrate Kwanzaa. The dominant society doesn't truly recognize Kwanzaa, Black Love Day, African Freedom Fighters Day, Malcolm X's birthday, Marcus Garvey's birthday, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on, right? So we don't need a dominant society to sign off on us celebrating ourselves in our own unique way of being African and human in the fullest sense. However, I say for those who argue, the Candace Owens of the world, those on the right, those on Fox News that argue that we're just engaging in self-segregation or racial balkanization. And there are some saying, well, I'm only going to celebrate the 4th of July. Well, that's your right. But the reality situation is, I always tell people, keep that same energy with St. Patrick's Day. Keep that same energy with Yom Kippur. Keep that same energy with Day of the Dead, a Cinco de Mayo. Then I'll take you serious. But what tends to happen is people don't keep that same energy when it comes to other racial ethnic groups and minoritized groups here in America. They only keep that energy when it comes to Black people, because what? We're the lowest hanging fruit, unfortunately. What tends to happen here is, as a result of that, we don't have the political, social, economic, or really even military power to resist these type of vulgarities that are being spewed at us, right? And as a result, this is easy picking. And for many, this is almost political theater and a way of actually making your bones. If you want to be taken seriously as a politician, you throw Black people under the bus. This is really the state of the world, of the country that we're living in. Secondly, most importantly, I think also is I've always cautioned against this in many of my videos about the danger of symbolic political victories versus substantial ones. And as I stated before, symbolic political victories tend to be a situation in which what? The person elected looks like you, right? Or and that on its face, the bill that was passed or the person that was elected looks like it would benefit the Black community. But in the long term, and that actually benefits the white community. This is what critical race theorists call interest convergence, right? We know critical race theory is making headway in the news right now. But I'll give you an example in terms of the election of Barack Obama. For many Black people, they argue this was a actualization of Dr. King's dream, that we wouldn't be judged by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. And this was seen, of course, through the meteoric rise of Barack Obama, who was then a junior senator, into becoming what? The first African-American or Black president of the United States of America. So for many Black people, we said, hey, we've arrived. We've seen the mountaintop. However, what we saw was the moment Obama was elected, we started seeing media stories of, is this now a post-racial society? So on its face, America has turned a corner. Racism is no longer an issue. Systematic institutional discrimination and barriers are now being removed due to the historic election of Barack Obama as the nation's first Black president. However, what ended up taking place in reality was we saw a rise in white nationalist hate groups. We saw a rise in extrajudicial violence against African Americans, right? We saw a rise in issues of anti-Black racism and discrimination, institutional, personal, and systematic across the board, right? And so as a result, this is how we got Trump, right? But I say that to say, we didn't ask for a holiday. What we asked for, and what I've been advocating for, and I've written a opinion piece on this, was an executive order outlawing all killings of unarmed civilians in this country, making it a federal law in which, if found guilty, you receive a mandatory minimum sentence of 25 years to life. I believe that in itself would curtail the issues of police genocide here in America, where I shot the guy, I don't know why, shoot first, shoot second, shoot third, ask questions later, and then guess what? I get off with administrative leave. Speaking of which, we know in the George Floyd trial, what we see going on is Mr. Chauvin is slated to be, if I can remember correctly, sentenced on a Saturday. Now, I've been to court before. I've never heard of the court being open on the weekend. And I believe that this may be a situation where they're planning on running the okie doke and he may just get a very light sentence. And so they're looking at cordoning off the downtown area. So we're going to have to be on the lookout for that. But also, I think it's very important that when we talk about substantial political victories versus symbolic ones, we still haven't got that executive order that I mentioned. The George Floyd Justice Act still hasn't been passed. An anti-lynching bill still haven't been passed. These are issues that are very pertinent to the African community. There was a poll that was done in terms of what issues are most important for the African American community politically. Criminal justice reform was number one. But what we got was, of course, a holiday. I'm not against us having a holiday. I'm all for getting a day off, spending time with the family, community, et cetera, et cetera. But what we want is tangibles. What we want is tangibles, right? Reparations is part of those tangibles. But most importantly, and this is really the point I want to really bring home to kind of coalesce or crystallize this whole issue that I'm talking about with Juneteenth is William C. Rowland, retired New York Times columnist, former HBCU football player, wrote what I believe is actually an excellent book, seminal book, $40 Million Slaves, The Rise, Fall, and Redemption of the African American Athlete. And he talks about in the book that African American athletes are put on a conveyor belt, in which they're dumbed down politically, coming from inner city, urban, or rural communities, and put through expensive feeder programs to where they lose all sense of racial consciousness. I argue that a conveyor belt system is being ran today in the American political system, in which we have this complex web of lobbyists, congressional districts, etc., And the whole goal is what simply to get Black people to vote for the Democratic or Republican Party, but we receive no tangible benefits as a result. So with that being said, I think what is most important is that we take the mindset of our late great ancestor, Dr. John Henry Clark, who of course was a Pan-Africanist. He was a friend and mentor of Malcolm X. Malcolm X learned much of his history from reading the text that Dr. John Henry Clark taught him to read. And as many of you may not know, Dr. John Henry Clark actually wrote the charter for the Organization of African American Unity on his dining room table a week before Malcolm X was assassinated. But I'll say that to say that Dr. John Henry Clark taught us that as the Black community, not only here in America, but throughout the world globally, that we have to have no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. And those interests has to be what? Being from a Black perspective, being Black-minded, focusing on Black power, being Pan-Africanist is what? We have to control the politics and economics of our communities. We have to coalesce and work together and make sure that we are demanding policies from the government that allow us to build political, social, economic, and of course, military power. And we have to build our own institutions. So with that being said, just want to wrap this up. We talk about celebrating Juneteenth, the good, bad, and the ugly. As I've always stated, we should always be celebrating our own holidays. We don't look to have the dominant society actually sign off on what we do and how we do it. Secondly, as I said it before, chattel on slavery hasn't actually ended. The 13th Amendment states that what? Slavery is a crime unless used as punishment for slavery is illegal unless used as punishment for a crime. And as Du Bois stated, late great W.B. Du Bois, he stated what? We had a day in the sun, a day of jubilee, a Black Independence Day, right? And then what happened? We went right back into servitude, and that was, of course, Black codes, sharecropping, that transitioned to Jim Crow. As we all know now, we have the new Jim Crow, which Black people are being discriminated against if they have a felony in the same manner that it was legally acceptable and socially acceptable to discriminate against African Americans during the Jim Crow era. Last but not least, want to make sure that we focus on substantial political victories, not symbolic political victories. We don't care what the person looks like. We don't care if they could do the stanky leg. We don't care about if they have hot sauce in their purse. We don't care about if they watch Black Panther. We don't care about how attractive the person is. The only thing that we should care about is the policies, their policy positions in relation to the African American community. I'm going to say that one more time because this is very important. We don't care about how attractive the person is. We don't care about what college they went to. We don't care about who their parents are, okay? The only thing that matters for a politician to get the Black vote is we must care about their policy positions in relation to the Black community. That is all. And last but not least, we have to get off this conveyor belt system, okay, in which we are simply used every 2 to 4 years to elect someone into the Democratic Republican Party. One bites you with a smile, the other bites you with a growl, the wolf or the fox, as Malcolm talked about, and we get nothing in return but empty symbolism. I'll show you Black power. So with that being said, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. I'm out. Peace.